All right, how's everyone doing? And here we are. Today we are going to be talking about something that's very important and it's serious business. And that is personal branding for creators of D&D content, creators like us, or creators like yourselves who might be putting out some dungeon craft modules or writing adventures with DM's Guild or creating a stream or creating some artwork and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's the topic for today. And yes, serious face, serious business, because this is something that I think we could all benefit from. A lot of us are trying to get noticed by Senpai, trying to make it big out there in D&D and finding ways to be more visible in our hobby. And I think that what I'm going to cover today and the secrets I'm going to share, they're not quite secrets. If you have gone for career coaching or image coaching, you would kind of be familiar with personal branding. But in case you're not, I hope that today's discussion is going to be beneficial for everyone. And of course, this is a rehash of what we covered on our stream last evening because our VOD was kind of scuffed, right? So we didn't have a good time with our recordings for our VOD, and I felt that, let's do this again. Let's do a quick recap. And I'm going to try to finish this in maybe about an hour or thereabouts. It took 2 hours for the stream last night, but I'm going to be just breezing through the slides real quick, and there are slides. So yeah, off we go. Off we go. So personal branding is a question that I think we need to ask ourselves. What is personal branding to begin with, right? And that is something that may not be immediately apparent to you. But personal branding is about creating a positive image for yourself and building this personal branding, this personal brand, because you are also a product, is going to help you with improving your credibility. Why do I say improving your credibility? Because whatever public face you present as a creator, as a designer, is so essential. And it definitely helps you to sell yourself and the work that you do better because you want to have an image, a consistent positive image for people that you want to care about your work. And at the same time, you really want to create something for yourself that you can fall back on at any point in time that represents who you are. So, a personal brand in that sense is making a representation of yourself for your audiences, right? And that is so, so helpful, especially if you are a creator and you're trying to differentiate yourself from all the creators that are out there. So let's talk a little bit more about that, shall we? Yeah, so like I was saying, you are also a product. And that is definitely true in this internet age where everyone's on social media, where everything is just put out there. And it's so easy for people to find out who you are, what you do, what you've done right, and what you've done that's not so good, right? And you really want to present an image of yourself that is positive. You want to put your best foot forward and you want to highlight what your strengths are, what you're good at. And especially the case for D&D creators, right? If you're a content creator, if you're a writer, you want to talk about your writing. If you're an artist, you want to show that, hey, maybe you're really good at landscapes, or maybe you're really good at creature design or environment design, or maybe you're really good at drawing props. And where it comes to designing adventures, you may want to, highlight your strengths in adventure design as well. Like maybe you're good at encounter design, like I kind of am. Or maybe you have some great ideas for role playing. You're really good at helping to highlight, certain aspects of the story through the characters. Maybe you're good at writing those characters and writing out tips on how to portray those characters. Your dramatis personae section of your module is really, really well thought out, and that's great. Or maybe you're a cartographer. Maybe you can draw maps really, really well, and that is one of the things that you can talk about as well. So So yeah, so you are a product and you want to share all these talents that you have and bring these talents to the forefront. You don't want to, be seen as just any typical creator. There's not a whole lot that you can talk about yourself, and that's not so good, right? Because you do want to differentiate yourself. You do want to share with people what you're really good at. And that also comes to my second point, which is, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to tell the world about your work? And that is something that you need to really think about as a creator, how you differentiate yourself from others. Um, Maybe you write really difficult encounters or really complicated encounters like I have, or maybe you are just really, really good at, creating environmental effects. So what do you want to be known for? What kind of consistency in your work do you want to be known for? What's your unique selling point? That's also something you want to think about. Yeah, because like I said, in the end of the day, it's one complete package, right? You're not just selling your work, you're selling yourself as a talent. And I think that that's really something essential that you as a creator need to kind of figure out. And that's gonna come into producing this one entire package for you that, falls into place and becomes your personal brand. Yeah. So here's a question that I think I hear a lot from people in the hobby. And this is a question that doesn't really have a right or wrong answer. It also sounds kind of like the title of certain, Japanese isekai novels or fantasy stories. Is it wrong to sell yourself as an expert in your hobby? Um, my short answer is that's all up to you. Like for myself, I have monetized my hobby. I have made it a point to market myself as a subject matter expert for D&D. I'm a game evangelist. I'm an editor for that can work on D&D 5th edition content. I'm a writer. I'm a developmental editor for various adventures that have been published so far in Adventures League and stuff like that. And that's perfectly okay. And on top of that, I saw myself as a consultant, as a professional game master. I sell my services as a career coach, as an image consultant, as a for all these things, as a pop culture consultant as well. And that's perfectly fine because you are highlighting your strengths and using those strengths to help you to do something that you care and love about. And monetizing your hobby is pretty much for me, just making a career out of this thing, all the various things I love. Yeah. And people who kind of know me, kind of know my history, they'll kind of know that I started out as a pop culture influencer, as a cosplay influencer, in fact. And because Senpai noticed, and that was how we got our head start in working with video game companies because Senpai noticed us, and we started building up our portfolio and developing our expertise and our repertoire, right? So that's eventually what brought us to where we are today. And D&D has always been an integral part of that because I learned a lot about how to carry myself, how to roleplay, how to act, how to host events, how to interact with people through playing Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing. So there's a lot of opportunity to bring all the skills that you learned in your hobby to the fore. And you can sell yourself as an expert in your hobby if you want to, but there's also no reason why you can't just treat it as a hobby. Treat it as something that you're doing on the side, just on your day off or something, because that's not your career. That's not what defines you, and that's perfectly okay. So this is a question that you want to ask yourself, and this is also something that's useful to gather as part of your personal branding, right? Because sometimes you want to be seen as a subject matter expert. If you want to develop a career in tabletop role-playing games, which is a very insular industry where you kind of need to know someone to get somewhere for the most part, or you need to have a big enough network, or you need to have a big enough volume of work and enough credibility to put yourself out there, then yeah, maybe it's okay for you to think a little bit about where you stand with your hobby and how you are in fact a subject matter expert and market yourself as such. If this is just gonna remain a hobby for you. This is not your day job. This is not something that you want to do for the rest of your life. Then hey, you know what? Just tell people that you're a hobbyist. That's perfectly fine, and that you're writing or creating content because that's just something you're doing on the side and it's fun for you, and that's perfectly okay. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. But this is also something you want to integrate into your branding. So look into that and see where you stand and give that a bit of think. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what personal branding kind of does. Yeah. And personal branding is really about you telling your story, about you telling people where you stand with D&D, what's your relationship with D&D, and maybe, why they should be going for your work, your content, rather than the content of someone else. And I can guarantee you there are hundreds, thousands, maybe 100,000 people published on DM's Guild, I think. So there are so many people who have put out content on DM's Guild. Some of them are pay what you want or absolutely free, or and some of them are paid products like paid hardcovers, stuff like that, and that is perfectly fine. And what you want to do is you want to define yourself and tell people where you stand amidst these hundreds or thousands of people, 10,000s of people. Like, what sets you apart from them? And this is where you tell your story. Because everyone's a unique creator. Everyone writes differently, everyone has different ideas, and everyone has different concepts and themes that they bring to the fore in their writing, in their creation. Right? Whether it's your artwork, whether it's your adventure that you're publishing, whether it's your homebrew world, whether it's the stream that you're producing for, whatever it is, there's always a unique take to it. And that often, more often than not, in fact, stems from yourself, your experiences, and what you care about in D&D. So this is where I want to challenge you to think about this. How would you describe yourself, your relationship with D&D, and your experiences in a few paragraphs? It doesn't have to be very long paragraphs. It doesn't have to be 2,000 words. You're not writing your life story here. You're just trying to summarize and crystallize all that you have experienced and what defines you as a D&D creator. And you can just keep it to maybe 150 words or so. You don't have to go into incredible detail about this. But this is something that will be helpful for you to internalize and also to refine and use in something called your boilerplate. So what is a boilerplate? So for a lot of writers, on the backs of the novels that they publish, or on the inner flap of the jacket, or sometimes if you're writing online and you can see that there's always this little bit of information at the bottom of an online article that kind of tells you like a little bit about the writer, about what they do, what they really like, and what kind of other things and causes they're kind of involved in, or maybe some interesting facts about them. So that is kind of like a boilerplate. And a boilerplate is a great way of building your personal branding, because this is you trying to summarize everything about what sets you apart, what makes you unique, what makes you the writer, the creator, you basically. And this boilerplate is as simple as maybe a little bit about your history with D&D, a little bit about your personal achievements, things you've done so far, things that you're currently involved in, the projects that you're working on, maybe your latest dungeon craft story, or the latest artwork that you're putting out, or maybe a Kickstarter project that you're involved in, or a community that you founded, or a community that you're kind of supporting. And also maybe one or two interesting facts about yourself. And you can tie that in with, the hobby of the game, of D&D itself, so that you can, I suppose, draw some relevance for what you do and what you're great at, to the hobby, right? So this is all about putting all the information that you already have and already should know together and kind of summarizing it. And this is why it's called a boilerplate. It's just like a small couple of paragraphs that people can just take a look at, and you can kind of see that all this information is right there, and this is the core of your personal branding, creating that image through this little bit of content. And it's not too difficult, I would say. It's not incredibly challenging. And you just really need to sit down and practice and give it a think and refine it. And very soon you'll have this little bit of information that you can call your own, that you can put at the back of every project that you have, put at the bottom of your artwork. And often when I invite guests to come for the shows that I run, or maybe when I invite guests to be a guest speaker or to join a panel or something, the boilerplate is also what I use to help to promote them. It's also the same for when you maybe want to get involved in a big project among other creators, other writers. You sort of want to have this boilerplate available because it's just a quick, snappy way of talking about what you've done so far, your successes, a bit about your credentials. And this is great to have for that because no one's going to want to read your 2,000 word essay life story. No one really cares that much, but they're probably going to be able to absorb maybe one or two paragraphs, maybe three. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things we can do with the boilerplate writing exercise. So here's the thing. These are also other things you want to keep in mind when you are doing your boilerplate, right? You want to keep it genuine. You're here to talk about your achievements, the things that you've done, how many successes you have racked up in the D&D content you've created so far. Maybe you are an influencer with a YouTube channel about D&D that has like 500,000 subscribers, and that is perfect. That's great. Or if you are a DC writer or a D&D homebrew designer that's published on DM's Guild, and you have like best-selling titles. You've got some badges from DM's Guild. You've sold 25 titles which have scored at least a copper badge, which means you made at least 51 sales per title and above. That's kind of not too bad. That's stuff you can talk about. You're not here to brag about your achievements. You're here to tell people exactly as it is. These are facts. You're not here to inflate them, but simply to say, hey, these are the things I've done, and this is why I am credible, why you should look at my work, why Senpai should notice me and invite me to write official D&D content, for example. Yeah, so keep it genuine, keep it brief. You don't have to be too elaborate about this. And of course, keep it snappy. What do I mean by keeping it snappy? So you want to keep your boilerplate kind of memorable. You want people to think about what you've done in a favorable way. You can write it, with a bit of puns or whatever. Make it interesting for your reader. And I think that that's really helpful. Yeah, and of course, keep it succinct. Get to the point. No one's gonna want to read your backstory, like I said, right? You don't have to be super detailed about it, and you just want to make sure that the important bullet points are all kind of there. So that would really help you out when it comes to designing your boilerplate. And this is the core, like I said, of your personal branding. So this is also something that will be really helpful because if you want to keep things consistent, you want to keep yourself at the forefront of people's recollection. You want to keep reminding them why is it that your work is the way it is. And this is where you can add your boilerplate to the back of your latest Dungeon Craft adventure, perhaps. Yeah, or add it to the back of all future publications that you want to make. Or have it somewhere on your profile page or something. So it does kind of help. So once you get your boilerplate kind of done, you can just put it anywhere that might be helpful for you, for your branding. So let's take a look at, an example, shall we? Let's take a look at an example. Like I said, we're gonna be encouraging all of you to write your own boilerplates. Yeah. And of course, I do not know our viewers well enough, so I'm not going to be able to help one of you do this on the fly on air. But I'm going to be showing instead something I wrote for myself. And people often say that writing about yourself is far, far harder than writing about someone else. And I can tell you, I agonized over my boilerplate for the longest times before I decided, hey, you know what? Screw it. Let's just go wild with it and just keep it simple, keep it to the point, keep it snappy. And it kind of worked for me. So I focused on the facts. So here we go. So if you take a look at this example, I'm talking about what I did with D&D. And like I said, in the formula is, talk a little bit about your history, your relationship with D&D, and what you kind of do with the game, right? So here we go. So this is kind of like part one. So Jason's love affair with Dungeons and Dragons began close to 3 decades ago with a hand-me-down 1983 red box. So you can kind of tell from this first sentence, a bit of a timeline, and yes, I am kind of old. Uh, I got the red box, which was a hand-me-down from one of my cousins sometime in the mid 90s. So that was when I was kind of like early teens or thereabouts. Since then, he has terrorized numerous players both on and offline as Dungeon Master. So talk about what you do with the game, like whether you play the game often, whether you're a game master, whether you're how involved are you, and in what medium do you play? So in this case, I talk about my involvement with both on and offline communities. And in fact, I used to play a lot more online than offline. I was very active on various forums, and I have been mostly DMing, just like in those forever DMs. I talk a little bit about what I've done as well here. So in the next couple paragraphs, you can tell, he contributed to numerous Dungeons and Dragons fan projects at the crest of the third edition Open Gaming Wave. So this was during, I think, let me think a bit, 2000-ish, and has since published multiple best-selling D&D Adventures League titles under the Triple C program, which I have done, and who's there, of course, was nominated for an Annie Awards in the 2019 for organized play category. And of course, it was a nominee, so that's something to talk about because this is a pretty big thing, I guess, in TTRPGs, right? The Annie Awards. So that's kind of like a selling point. So you can focus on your own selling points as well. Like if you have any awards recommendations, if you were part of any anthologies, if you were part of any community activities that you were involved in that were on a global scale, please talk about it. Yeah, so next part. This is a little bit about my professional life, my professional expertise, and other things I do as well. So presently, he plots world domination as Overlord of Neo Tokyo Project, a pop culture marketing collective. That's us. And Overlord is just a fancy way of saying mascot, right? Because that's what I am. I'm the one wearing the silly hats, like this Dodoko hat here, and being the public face. I'm the I guess the bard of the party, I suppose, the charisma character. He's also the producer of popular international art convention Dojin Market, which is something we do as well. We are a convention and events company, and Dojin Market is probably the biggest arts and illustration festival here in Singapore and for a good part of Southeast Asia. Co-founder of D&D Adventures League Singapore community, which is something that I've been heavily involved in since 2016, and we kind of elevated, DDAL SG to becoming the premier Adventures League community here, and we were heavily involved in pushing Adventures League as a format in Singapore. RPG Day Singapore is a convention that we kind of do on a community scale, just a tiny hobby event for tabletop games. There's also other things I've done, which is like game evangelist, editor, pet for hire. So professional life. Talk about a bit of your professional credentials in this part. My second paragraph, this is not a bad thing to talk about because you want to show senpai and anybody else who you might want to notice you why you do the things you do, why you're good at what you do. So here's paragraph 2, right? And like I said, tying things in to the end, you throw in a bit of facts, throw in a bit of humor, throw in stuff that kind of links back to the game and shows a side of your personality. So Jason is that he's a social rogue, yes, kinda, but we all know I'm really the mascot. Loves cunning wordplay and believes that vicious mockery is the best spell ever. And it's definitely the case, isn't it? Vicious mockery is awesome. So here we go. So that's just a quick look at my boilerplate and what I would normally use when I'm selling myself and my skills and my services. And something that will include at the back of adventures that I write if there's opportunity for it. And you, on your end, kind of need to start thinking about how you would write your boilerplate because that's so helpful. Yeah, and one look at your boilerplate will kind of give people a good, kind of like an impression of what to expect of you and your work. So that would definitely be of great benefit to you if you are a creator. Yeah. So now that we've talked a little bit about telling your story, I think it's also important to think a little bit about how you live your story. And this is something that you have to keep in mind all the time because personal branding is not just about writing your boilerplate, not about just, writing that little bit of content and just leaving that and being done with that. No, it's about being consistent. It's about demonstrating that you are walking the talk. You're doing everything that you have set out to do, in your boilerplate, right? You're demonstrating that you live in a genuine way, that you are essentially emulating everything you stand for, right? Or rather, embodying everything you stand for. So this is where you show people. You don't tell them. You have to show them as well. And the best way to do that, is to build a social media presence. And this is also something I think a lot of creators can afford to work on. I appreciate the fact that for some of you, it might just be a matter of privacy. You don't want to show too much of your life or too much of what happens at home, your public, trying to keep a separation between your public image and your private image. And that's perfectly okay. But if you are going to be a creator, if you're going to put yourself out there and you want to build your brand, you want to build your credibility, and you want people to step up and notice you, then you will definitely need some degree of social media presence. And if you want to screen that, away from what you do in your daily life to maintain some degree of privacy, that's perfectly okay. And if you want to, try to enrich your social media presence, maybe the next part of this discussion will be helpful to you. Yeah, one of the immediate things that will be of great benefit to you if you decide to augment your social media presence and to make yourself more of a public figure, I would say, is that you also get a chance to build connections. You get to build bridges with other people who are like-minded creators, designers, writers. You get to build your networks and interact with each other on social media. And this can be very enriching. This can be very beneficial to you because you will be able to tap on the expertise of other people that you know. And having generally worked with creatives, I can tell you that it's so incredibly helpful to be able to just bounce ideas. Yeah. So some of the tools and platforms that you can look at, I would say, are social media platforms, obviously like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. TikTok is really popular now. If you are into doing the visual thing, or maybe just doing some talking heads, uh, go for TikTok. 1 minute D&D videos are very popular. Facebook is generally good for dealing with communities, hobby groups in general. Twitter is great for reaching out to other creatives. A lot of creatives use Twitter. A lot of the writers for D&D content, fan creators, artists, designers, cartographers, they're all on Twitter. And Twitter is so easy to get into, right? It's as simple as, typing a couple sentences, putting your thoughts out there. Sometimes tagging on a picture that's easy to use. It doesn't require a whole lot of effort. Instagram is definitely more visual. If you are thinking of posting visual content, pictures, short videos, clips, whatever, Instagram's pretty good for that as well. Of course, you want to pick and choose the platforms that matter to you. The platforms that you're comfortable with using. Like for us at NTP, we have a pretty big presence on Facebook because we built that up over the years as social media influencers in the pop culture and cosplay space. And we can still tap on that for other hobbies and other activities that we do. And people that follow our page kind of knows how big of a D&D geek I am, right? And they know about all our little adventures in D&D and Magic the Gathering and stuff like that because we're not afraid to talk about our hobbies. We're also kind of active on Twitter, and in recent months, we have been super active on Instagram. We've been posting more pictures. Before that, Instagram was just a way for us to talk about our daily lives. So we had a daily lives of NTP hashtag just for us, where we posted about our adventures in looking for all sorts of tasty food here in Singapore. And Singapore is very well known for tasty food, right? And that's been kind of evolving. So we have kind of been posting a lot more of Jazian's work. So Jazian has been working a lot on painting miniatures, terrain, the cool stuff that we've done so far, and the cool stuff that we use in our games for our customers, for people who have done bookings with us, or people who have hired us as professional game masters to do private games and campaigns. And a lot of that goes onto our Instagram. So every now and then, we also kind of post about some of the table setups, and I think a lot of people really like the idea of seeing how other game masters, other DMs do their table setups. Like for us, we go full on terrain, full on miniatures. We have elaborate props, we have lighting, we have smoke machines, we have uh, we have some really crazy like you know all sorts of small props that we use to enliven and enrich the experience. Yeah, and all those things go onto our social media, and it helps to generate interest in the things we do, and that really does help a bit. So on our end, we use our social media to talk about the collective. It's not just about me, Crimson being DM or Jazian being the painter and designer of our terrain and miniature pieces, but also about us as a collective. And that's perfectly okay. You don't have to always have a social media presence for just yourself, but if you are working with a large group of creators, you can have a joint platform and you can use that. That's okay. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about communities as well. So, like I said, I was really, really active on forums in the past, and there are still some good D&D forums out there. So, EN World is obviously one of the longest existing forums. It's positively a boon for D&D players, right? So, there are other places as well, like Giant in the Park, Giant in the Playground, I think. Yeah, Giant in the Playground had a forum that was kind of active as well. And of course, I have to give a shout out to Myth Weavers, which was the defining forum for me. I was very, very heavily active in Myth Weavers forum, and I have been a member of the forum for about 2 decades now, I think. So yeah, so being active on those forums has really helped me to reach out to more people and to interact with more people and get more and get involved with more other more DMs and players, and that's great. Of course, there's Discord, which is a great platform as well for dealing with communities. A lot of artists, streamers, creators, writers, they have their own Discords for their own communities, and that's great. And it's the same for us. We have an MTP Discord as well. And we are also kind of involved in the Adventurous League segments of the official D&D Discord, and also with other Discord communities that we kind of work with or interact with. Yeah, so those are excellent places for you to reach out to new people, reach out to other like-minded creators, and just talk about stuff, just bounce ideas, just get creative together, work on jamming to kind of create content, maybe just do all sorts of things, right? And of course, one other thing you can think about, how to get involved with professional networks, like maybe joining a writers association and their associated maybe forums or Discord groups, or maybe some other platform that they use for social media. Or you can talk about joining with certain training groups or certain science fiction writers association, or maybe fantasy writers association, role-playing game publishing fan groups as well. And these are great. These are perfectly okay, and they are really helpful to widening your network, because you don't just want to interact with people from the communities who are your audiences, and that's great. Interacting with audiences who are people who consume your products, who buy your modules, who support your artwork or watch your streams or whatever, that's great. But at the same time, you also want to talk to other people in the same field, in the same industry, whether they're publishers, whether they're writers, whether they're creators, and build, kind of work together. It's kind of like building a support group and a network where you can find ways and opportunities to collaborate. And that is great. So think a little bit about that. Think about where you stand in all this, and kind of pick a few channels from these various tools and platforms I talked about that you can kind of work with, that you can kind of use to help to constantly promote your brand, keep yourself at the top of your recall, and talk and show about your life, right? Show about the things that you do. And here's a question that I get fairly often as well when I talk a little bit about personal branding. How often should I post on social media? And this is a question that I don't have a good answer for, but I think it's really important to think about. And the short answer for this is as often as you can. You want to be consistent. You want to always be visible on social media. So you do want to kind of have a presence. And you don't want to be one of those guys that post like one or two pictures or one or two snippets of information about your latest project, and then just disappear off the grid for like 6 months, and you are never seen again. And then people are going to forget about you. No matter how cool your initial post is, no matter how cool the initial work that you've put out on social media looks like, it's just going to be something that fades into the background because you're not there. You're not present on social media. So you want to kind of maybe keep to a consistent schedule. And I know scheduling is the worst thing ever. I can guarantee you that even I myself, I have trouble adhering to a social media schedule, to a streaming schedule. Sometimes it's not great because writers and deadlines and schedules, right? Procrastination is ever the habit of a writer, as someone is wont to say. Uh, so yeah, so I would like to post more often on social media, like as not, but if possible, I would say keep to a consistent schedule. Try to maybe get something out there on social media every couple of days, just to remind people that, hey, you kind of exist and you are still constantly being creative, constantly putting out good stuff. You want people to know that you're putting out good stuff, and you want them to notice you for putting out good stuff. So that is also a part of your social media, a part of your personal branding. You want to keep yourself at the top of their mental recall. You want to keep yourself visible. You want to keep yourself on the radar of senpai so senpai can notice you, right? So what should you post about? What kind of content should you talk about when you're posting on social media? Things that happen in your daily life, and this is actually not a bad thing at all. If you are comfortable sharing a little bit about what you do in your daily life, so maybe something fun, something wholesome, or something interesting that you came across, something that inspires you. Yeah, people like slice of life stories. So things that happen in your daily life are kind of great. So we have a daily lives of NTP hashtag for that. Like I said, it's a lot about our food adventures, us exploring Singapore, looking for good stuff to eat. But at the same time, we also post about fun things that we come across, or little bits of our adventures doing things that are not hobby related, like maybe when we travel overseas or something like that. You just post about your observations, stuff like that, and that's perfectly fine. And of course, we also have daily derps of NTP, where silly stuff happens to myself or Jazian or anybody else who works with us, and we just talk a little bit about it and have a good laugh about it. But it's mostly me being clumsy or silly about stuff, and that's perfectly okay because I'm the mascot, right? And it's perfectly fine for you to make jokes at my expense. So yeah, fun things that happen in your daily life. Talk about your current ongoing projects. I think that's really helpful as well. Yeah, because you want to generate interest, you want to build hype about your projects. So if maybe you just got your latest project off the press, you have a physical product that you have just done. Maybe you made a series of postcards about D&D, or you made a spell book prop or something that you're gonna put on your Etsy store, or maybe you are a writer and you designed a brand new adventure and you just got the artwork that's gonna go onto the cover from your artist. Post about that, talk about it, generate interest in what you're doing. So these are your current projects, your ongoing projects. And if something is going to go to launch, maybe in a couple weeks, you want to build hype, you want to build interest in your project. So maybe you want to post several different posts over the course of those 2 weeks leading up to the publishing of your adventure on DM's Guild, maybe. So you can talk a little bit about your design process. You can talk about some of the artwork that's going in there. And artwork is great because everyone loves a visual representation. They may just get, bleary eyed and turned off by chunks and chunks of text. But if you talk a little bit about your design process and your artwork and you show snippets, something that's bite sized but still directly relevant, people are going to love that. So think about it. And of course, you want to talk about things that you care about, things that interest you, causes that, and themes that are relevant to your work, that inspire you, or that you want to champion. Like for myself, I like to write about Asian content because, first of all, I'm Asian. I live in Singapore, and I think there's not enough representation of of East Asian content in D&D. And we all know Oriental Adventures wasn't great. So we want to try to delve into more Asian content in our work, which is why a lot of these stories that I write tend to be, kind of related to more Asian themes, or I draw inspiration from Asian pop culture that I have been exposed to or that I studied because of my film major, and kind of things that I care about. So that's something that you can post about in your social media as well. You can talk about the kind of inspirations behind your work and the causes that drive the themes and ideas behind your work, and that's perfectly fine. Or if you love cats or you love dogs and you're writing a story about cats and dogs, just go for it, talk about it. If you have pets, um, post about that, post a little bit about your other hobbies as well. I think that's perfectly fine. So you want to remind people that you are a human, that you have so many things going on in your life. You are not just carefully curating. Well, you kind of are carefully curating uh, the image that you put up on social media, but at the same time, you can also widen um, the scope of what you post or what you curate. Yeah. So a lot of people assume that personal branding is about crafting an image and that you're being very, I would say, manipulative in the kind of things that you post. And I would say that that's not true. That's not true because the most important part about personal branding is to show that you are genuine, that you are approachable, that you are someone who is, I would say, for want of a better word, an important role model in the industry, right? Because you're posting about your successes, you're posting about how you matter and why people should be coming to you because you are the subject matter expert. That's one. That's a professional side. But of course, you also want to show the softer side of things that you go through, or the softer side of your life, and show interesting aspects of your life to create that holistic, that complete picture of you as a person. So that's, I guess, content for your social media, for your personal branding in a nutshell. So yeah, like I was saying, build hype about your projects. So this is something I cannot stress enough. Yeah, you need to always prepare people who might be your fans, who might be your followers, who might be just kind of interested in your work in general, and prime them to be consumers in that sense. Yeah, you want to prime them to be interested enough in your project that they can support you, even if they don't buy anything. But the fact that they can kind of know about your projects, that is on the top of their minds, now that is really, really helpful. Yeah, so you don't need to talk about dollars and cents here. It's not about making the conversion, it's not about making the purchase, but it is definitely about getting the awareness out there. And this is something that you need to focus on. And this is only possible if you have a big enough social media presence, or that even if you're completely new, you may want to kind of build up your social media presence so that at least you'll be more visible. I think that that's really helpful. Yeah, so this is something you need to think about. And I can tell you for a fact that, maintaining the social media presence is very time consuming. It's going to take you maybe 2 hours on every day that you are going to be posting on social media, generating content for social media. And it can kind of become a chore if you are not used to it, but it gets easier. It gets easier over time. And once you get disciplined enough to just block it off in your schedule, think about personal branding as selling yourself. Yeah, and selling yourself, putting your best foot forward, developing yourself as a brand. Now that is a full-time job. And you can just do it by just living it, by being disciplined enough to adhere to a schedule and following that schedule to help to promote your work and to promote yourself. Yeah, and through that, build hype about your projects, especially the ones that are coming up that you're going to publish, that's going to hit DM's Guild, or that you're releasing on Kickstarter or whatever. And that will be definitely very helpful for you. Now, a little bit more about how you can use social media to your advantage. I'm going to talk here a little bit about some things that we have observed. Yeah, and these may not necessarily work for you at first, or you may not feel comfortable doing this, but I would say once you get a hang of it, it becomes so much easier. And like I said just now, people are visual creatures, yeah. So it's really important to have pictures of your books, videos, things that engage the senses of your readers beyond just a block of text. A block of text on a white background is not great. You need to splash a bit of color into it. You need to have some degree of visual interest, like good layout or whatever in the book. Now that makes the difference, right? So the same goes for social media. You kind of need to have maybe a picture to illustrate the point. Uh, Use hashtags. Hashtags are really helpful. Things like hashtag D&D 5th edition, hashtag Dungeons and Dragons, hashtag D&D Adventures League, stuff like that will help your post to stand out, makes it easier for people to track your posts as well. And if you have custom hashtags for the stuff that you do, like for us, we have things like I said, Daily Lives of NTP, we have D&D-C, D&D Southeast Asia, we have D&D SG, which is D&D Singapore, we have DDL SG as well. We have stuff that we have created. We have created these hashtags. We're the first to pioneer their use, and they have since become a very much an integral part of our social media strategy. And you should think about what kind of hashtags you want to use as well in your social media, because that makes finding your posts a lot easier. Of course, don't forget to tag relevant pages. Like if you want Wizards of the Coast Senpai to notice you, obviously you want to tag D&D underscore Wizards, and so on and so forth. D&D Adventures League, or whatever else that you're creating content for. Yeah, so you want to have that relevant, because that way you can cross promote. You can get the interest, get the attention of the people that you might want to reach out to. And who knows, who knows, they might share your work. Maybe the social media manager, the social media marketing people of a certain brand that you have been, kind of shilling for, that you've been kind of championing, may say, hey, this person's kind of great. They're doing good stuff and it aligns with our brand strategy. Maybe we should reach out to them. So that's something you can think about. And everyone knows that the holy grail of D&D hobby is to become an official designer for D&D, right? You want to become part of an official hardcover project, or you want to write for an Adventures League storyline or something. You want to get Senpai to notice you, basically. And the best way to do that is to use social media, because everyone is on social media. Everyone is so visible. And that's probably it. That's the strategy right there. See, that's something you can think about. So yeah, social media is great for creating conversations as well, especially on places like Twitter, sometimes on Facebook, sometimes on forums, on Discord channels, whatever. You can communicate with other like-minded fans, like-minded creators, hobbyists, stuff like that. Talk to people. And I cannot stress this enough. It's so essential not to create in a vacuum. So if you are kind of isolated, if you're writing your own dungeon craft story, and you are the writer, you are the editor, you're the cartographer, you're the artist, you are the everything in your project, you might not know where you went wrong, or you might not get a different perspective because you just haven't had the chance to reach out to other people, talk to them, and bounce ideas off each other. And I think that's really important. You don't want to also be stuck with an insular playgroup or something, because hey, that's going to create an echo chamber. That's not great. And that masterpiece that you think you wrote might actually be terrible when you publish it on DM's Guild, and you're not going to get any people interested in your work. So create conversations with people, talk about your work online, and invite conversation. Invite conversation, build a network, and build rapport with other creatives in the community. Yeah, don't forget to also post cool things or wholesome things, because those are often things that will generate conversation. Those are things that will spark interest. It will spark people liking or following your work, people stepping in to share your work. And that is great. That is great. So remember to reach out to more people through your conversations on social media, or ask questions, make a poll, make a survey. In fact, one of the easiest ways to spark conversation I've discovered on social media is ask a question. You could post a little bit about something that you happened across in your latest D&D game that you ran at a table, or maybe something that you're working on, and ask for feedback, ask for opinions. And you can generate conversations from those, and that's great. And who knows, it might give you a different perspective. So engage with other people through these conversations, and that will definitely widen your reach because people are going to be stepping up and they'll say, hey, this is interesting. I resonate with this. This same thing came up in my last game as well, and I'm kind of curious. Like, why did this rule get interpreted in this way? And it's not what it says in Sage Advice or something. And how would you do it? So stuff like that. Ask questions. And I think that would be so, so helpful in generating extra conversation, getting more people interested and involved in the work that you do and the things that you do. So yeah, so now I'm going to talk a little bit. So we're about selling your D&D product. So we talked about kind of like, branding yourself, kind of a little bit about selling yourself and selling selling your image online. And now we're going to talk about selling your product. So this is a bit of a departure from personal branding, but it's still kind of related because you need the personal brand to provide that level of credibility for your work, right? So first of all, you need to be able to build yourself as a brand before people might even be interested in your product. Because no one's going to go for someone who is kind of new, completely untested. They may give you kind of like a free pass if you're an amateur writer and you're doing this as a hobby and it's your first time, but it's not going to last very long, that kind of goodwill. It's not going to carry over to the rest of your work unless you have something to show for it. And this is where we come to a little bit about selling strategies for your D&D DM Skill product. And here we go. Remember that first impressions really count. And for us, we have discovered a couple of things that matter when it comes to making a good first impression. Yeah, and of course, these things are our findings. We've done a few community surveys in the D&D AL Singapore community in the past. And we have also acted upon that data to help us to kind of like using business intelligence, right? In that sense, we kind of use that data to help us shape our decision-making process when it comes to designing content. And a couple of things we discovered were that visual impact is really, really critical. I cannot stress enough how important visual impact is. Because, like I said before, and I've mentioned a few times during this entire discussion, visual impact is probably the most essential thing because people are visual creatures. It's that first impression, the first look at a product that determines whether they want to buy a product or not. And more often than not, they're more likely to look at something that's eye-catching, that's visually appealing, that has this interesting cover and artwork on the cover, as opposed to something that with this really bland, black text on a white background that just kind of sinks into each other, and it doesn't really have much appeal at first glance, right? So if you have a nice colorful cover, maybe with a dragon and people fighting the dragon, or some action sequence, some nice scene that's kind of fascinating, this big jarring colored blob that has some like weird squelchy tentacles and stuff. Even if it's some abstract cover that's maybe procedurally generated by AI or whatever, that's perfectly okay as long as it's visually impressive. Yeah, people are more likely to look at it a second time. And of course, I can go into great detail about layout for cover, color theory, why using red on your cover is more likely to draw attention, and stuff like that. But that is a story for another time. That is a story for when we talk about actual layout and design, which will happen maybe sometime next month, right? But in the meantime, understand that visual impact is crucial. That if you don't have great art on the cover, people are just not likely to give it a second glance. It's just going to sink into the morass of the other hundreds of thousands of DM's Guild titles that are, not very eye-catching, and that's going to be hard to differentiate. Of course, another thing that you can think about is content and writing. What does this mean? Content and writing? I'm talking about the quality of the presentation of the work in terms of your content, in terms of following house style, in terms of following spec, in terms of having good spelling, good punctuation, and good grammar. Of course, not a uh, if you're not a native English speaker, or if you're not someone who's very versed in English language, there are some obvious provisions for that. Yeah. But if you are publishing content for a primarily English speaking audience, you probably want to keep things consistent. You want to keep things up to a certain standard in terms of readability, in terms of the sentence structure, in terms of your grammar, your punctuation, your syntax, your vocabulary, the things you use. I'm not saying that you have to write in very flamboyant, very flowery prose. You don't have to use incredibly elaborate, sentence structures. You don't have to be very, very fluffy in your writing. You don't need that. But you should have good, simple English. It should be readable first and foremost, and you need to minimize the mistakes that you make in your content, because mistakes in content reflect a lack of rigor in your writing, whether you as a writer or a creator are not proofreading your work properly, or you're just not interested in proofreading your work. Who knows, right? No one's going to be able to tell at first glance whether you have trouble writing content because in a way that's grammatically correct, because you're just not used to it, or because that's not your first language. No one's going to care when they are a consumer. They're not going to empathize with you. So you want to make the best of your first impression. So get an editor, get someone else to look at your work, get someone to go through your content and maybe kind of help you out of that. But whatever the case is, you want to minimize the amount of mistakes that you make in your manuscript, in your final publication. And this is something that I cannot stress enough. Like for myself, if I were to be incredibly strict with a lot of the dungeon craft stories that have been published on DM's Guild so far, many of them wouldn't pass muster, because I would spot at least 5 mistakes on the first page that's in their preview, and I would question it and say, hey, why am I purchasing this piece of work for $4.99 when it doesn't look like they got an editor to look at it, when it doesn't look like they actually put in the effort to create better content? And that's not necessarily fair to the writer, because they may have a great story to tell, but the first impression does them a disservice. And that's not what you want. You want your content to be, kind of organized, kind of good. You want to make a great first impression with the content. You want to have your history, your background of your manuscript, the first part that's normally in the preview, read well enough that people will continue to be engaged and they want to read more. And that's the deciding factor. That's what draws them in and hooks them and makes them want to buy the module to read the rest of the pages in the preview. Yeah, so think a little bit about that. And of course, the last part here, and this may have some more direct relevance to Adventurers League, is loot. When we did our survey for the community, we discovered 43% of respondents were loot motivated. And that is often the case. People want to be the best at what they do, right? They want to be kind of good at what they do on their characters. And usually, for many characters, it comes down to the kind of magic items they can get from an adventure. And they play those adventures because they are interested in that magic item. And now I'm not saying that you need to put the best in slot items in all your adventures. You don't have to, but you want to put something interesting, something that's memorable, something that might work with enough players that they can work it into their RP. And that is where loot comes in. You want to seed something unique. You want to seed something interesting that would draw the attention of the players. And that would definitely help to make a good first impression as well. Yeah, and then word of mouth will kind of spread, and people say, "Hey, I like this adventure. It's not bad, but guess what? They also have this cool piece of loot in the end that you can get." And I think that would count for something. So think a little bit about this. I'm not saying that this is a perfect formula, but these are some of our findings, and we feel that sharing this with everyone might be helpful in giving you some perspective. So now this is something that I want to talk a little bit about as well. And this is an age-old question. It's a question of quality versus quantity. So would you like to publish one or two adventures, put out one or two products that are of sufficiently high quality? The production cost might be a lot higher. The production value might be a lot better as well because of the added budget. And well, maybe you just put out one adventure a year, which is what I normally do. I normally put out one or two adventures a year. Or do you want to put out 25 adventures over the period of 1 year, and they're kind of not that great? There's a lack of rigor in the work. It's maybe not so high quality. There's some mistakes here and there. The story isn't very well conceived, isn't very well thought out. But hey, you have gone for a more broad-based approach. You've gone for more. You have actually done more rather than less, and that has got to count for something as well, right? So I would say that this is kind of like a personal choice, a personal preference. For myself, I prefer to take however much budget I have for the projects and put it all into something or into one or two things that I think would be career defining for me. Because after all, I think it's more important to have quality and to be recognized, to have your personal brand associated with a product that is incredibly well conceived, well designed, and therefore very successful, as opposed to having your name associated with multiple products that may not be so good. And that could kind of hurt your brand because you will be known as that person that puts out multiple products, maybe one product every 2 weeks or something, but they're all kind of shoddy and that's not great. That's not what you want. So that's definitely something to think about. And of course, now we come down to talk about budget. And this is something that kind of deviates a bit from personal branding. I have to say that budget is a privilege. I do not deny the fact that having more money when you're publishing content will definitely make it so that your content is probably better simply because you can hire more artists, you can get a layout artist to come in, you can get an editor worth their salt and the money to help you look at your manuscript and stuff like that. And that is okay. That is what you can do if you have the privilege of money. But what if you are a hobbyist? If you are completely uninterested in making money out of your work, if you're just here to write and have fun and share your ideas with people, and you don't really care about monetizing your hobby, that's perfectly okay as well. You can you can be kinda, I guess, not so concerned about having a high budget as long as you adhere to the minimum standard of quality and follow the specifications listed out, say, for example, for Dungeon Craft, right? Where you don't make any glaring mistakes, where you have decent quality writing. You don't have to have a fancy cover. And your work should be able to stand on its own two feet and speak for itself. But of course, that means that you may not quite have the same kind of marketing value or the visual appeal, and therefore you're maybe a little bit behind when it comes to promoting your work, and that is the reality of the situation. Having a marketing budget versus having no marketing budget set aside for it can make a very big difference on the kind of work that you put out as well. But ultimately, like I said, this comes down again to quantity and quality. And if you have 25 products over the course of 2 years, for example, course of 1 year, you're going to be stretching your dollars kind of thin. And that means that there might not be quite as much budget to go around into developing those products as you would like it to be. And therefore, you'll only be able to hit a certain quality and you will be constrained by the budget. So, something to think about. This is a bit of the reality behind um, publishing in that sense, and the dollars and cents that you have to throw into publishing. And I can guarantee you one thing that I can definitely say for a fact is that publishing for DM's Guild is not going to be incredibly profitable for you unless you are one of the best sellers and you have been here in DM's Guild for a super long time. If you had the first mover advantage, and if you have had used the opportunity since when the first time people were invited to write dungeon craft or triple C's or to publish on DM's Guild to begin with, then you would have the opportunity to build your brand over the X number of years. And you would have had the opportunity to use that time to put out more content and to kind of sell your brand, sell yourself as a creator. But if you are just now jumping into DM's Guild to publish, if you are now just jumping into DM's Guild with season 11 to create your first, Well Beyond the Witchlight dungeon craft, and you are completely new to it, you're gonna need to think about making a career defining product. And for that, I would say you want some quality. You want to have good writing. You want to be eye catching and attention grabbing with your work. Maybe with the artwork, maybe with the cover art, and that's going to be the first step to people seeing, past the cover and starting to actually read your work. Because if you don't grab them in the first place, they're just going to pass your work over, right? So you do want to think about that. And I would say that throwing in a little bit of budget, of course, it's to your benefit if you are also a designer or artist. If you are a cartographer, you can save a lot on budget if you're able to do all those things yourself. If you, like me, are just good at writing and terrible at drawing, then you probably kind of want to work with someone else and maybe work something out. Yeah, and of course, that's something we can talk about later on when we talk about collaboration and opportunities in that regard. So, bottom line, and I'm just gonna say that this is gonna be tough for people to absorb sometimes. Shoddy work just does not sell. Yeah, and this is the reality of it. If you put out something that's not so great, it's gonna hurt your personal brand. You're gonna be known as that writer that does the penny dreadfuls, or the writer that does the poorly conceived stories, or the writer that has no consistency in their work, or whatever. And that's just gonna come back and bite you, and it will make you look kind of bad. And people are just, after a while, not going to buy your work anymore. And you're going to be one of those writers that hasn't sold more than 20 copies of DM's Guild, and you're probably not going to sell more than 20 copies. And if you cannot follow spec, if you cannot follow the guidelines stipulated in DM's Guild for publishing, if you cannot follow the basic formula or the basic concepts, you cannot use the mechanics of the game properly, then you're going to be in trouble, because it shows a lack of system mastery. And why would anyone hire you for work that goes beyond your hobby creations? Why would anyone hire you for professional level work if you're not able to follow spec, right? So it reduces your chances of being noticed, and the fact that you're not able to adhere to those restrictions will definitely mean that you're probably not going to be getting any invites to write for official content anytime soon. Yeah, so think a little bit about that as well. After all, if you are working with a big brand, and I can say that D&D is obviously a big brand, big brands also have an image and a reputation to uphold. And it's definitely not likely, in any sense of the word, right? No one in their right frame of mind would want to work with someone who's known for bad quality work, who is going to hamper the development and success of the brand. No one's going to work with someone who is not great for their product. So that's something to think about. So definitely try to always produce good quality work. Now I'm going to talk just a little bit, just touching on the importance of reviews. And reviews are things that we definitely want more of when we are creators of D&D content. Why? Because a review, in essence, is someone else helping to tell your story for you. Someone else is championing your work, and that is great. If they give you a positive, glowing review, that just kind of means that you've done pretty well, you've made a good impression, and that's word of mouth right there. That's going to help you to enhance the quality and the level of your brand and the quality and level of your product. And positive reviews, of course, add to your credibility. The more positive reviews you have, generally the better rated you are, the more likely you are to make sales on DM's Guild. I cannot stress this. And of course, taking things in your stride, if the reviews are not so good, or even if the reviews are kind of more in-depth and they kind of point out some of the flaws in your story, that can help you to get better, right? That can help you to develop better content, better work, fix the mistakes that you have made. It can be a great learning point. So that person that gives you a 1 and says, hey, this person's work is not great. These are the points that are not great. They can improve on this. That's actually not a bad review in a sense. Well, it's a terrible occurrence. It can be very demoralizing to get a 1 star on DM's Guild on your product. But that might help you out as well. That might strengthen your resolve. And maybe, the review kind of makes sense. After all, your story may not be for everyone. And unless you're very clear, very certain that you're able to push the story out there and tell people exactly what it says on the cover is what they'll get in the story, people may just not be entirely satisfied. There may be things in the story they don't agree with. Maybe some things just don't work for them. And that can happen. And they can leave a review for that. And that will help you to put things in perspective. And I think that that's great. That's good to have. So reviews are also helpful because you do want the visibility from the reviews, right? So regardless of the number of stars that you get, obviously the more stars, the better. But even if you are not that well rated, it's better than being unrated, because an unrated piece of work on DM's Guild is just asking for people to speculate that you don't have sales, because only people who have purchased the product or have been sent a review copy of the product can leave a review and leave a star rating. So think a little bit about that. It's more likely for people who have unrated products to not be purchased. And those who have ratings, even if it's not great, it might appeal to some people. The fact that people have actually bought the product says something about that. And of course, as always, the higher your star rating, the better in terms of the eyes of the public. And the more reviews you get, the more likely it is for people to actually pick up your work, because people trust the opinions of others in the same community. So think a little bit about that. So now, is it weird to send review copies to media? Short answer, no, it's perfectly okay. It's something we do in PR all the time. We send media drops, we send content to news outlets, we send content to community experts, we send to influencers. And this is a touching on PR territory here rather than personal branding, but it is still useful. And this kind of helps you out, because sending your manuscript to subject matter experts, sending a downloadable link to someone who says, who's kind of maybe an adventurously DM that kind of routinely reviews modules that they have run and post on their blog or something, could be helpful to you. It would help to heighten your visibility. And maybe people will kind of get interested in your work because this person who's kind of influential in the D&D community wrote about it or talked about it, and that is perfectly great. That's perfectly okay. So think a little bit about that as well. And if you have any connections in pop culture press, maybe there are D&D players who are also influencers that you have associated with in the past, you can definitely send review copies to them. It's a little trickier when it comes to sending review copies out cold to random, reviewers, bloggers, whatever, right? So you need to kind of build the rapport and build the relationship first. And this again comes back to working on social media to build those connections, right? Which we talked about just now when we're talking about social media. You want to build your networks, whether they're professional. Reviewers fall under the professional category. So think about that as well. Yeah. And now we're going to talk just a little as well on co-creation and co-branding of products. So we're kind of coming close to the end of our presentation. And like I said, I was trying to shave off some time from the initial presentation, which we did last evening on stream. And we are hitting the 1 hour, 20 minutes mark. So I guess we did sort of reduce the amount of time we took, because we took about whole 2 hours for that for last night. Yeah, so now where were we? Co-creation and co-branding of products. So what does this mean? This basically means that you reach out to someone else in the community that you want to work with, and you engage with them and talk about building a content together, building maybe a dungeon craft adventure together, or working on a stream together, or working on some project together, and that's perfectly cool, right? And you should, in fact, work with more people in the community if you think that that's helpful for you. Why? Because co-creation and co-branding comes with significant benefits. So some of the things that you can get out of this collaboration in that sense is the opportunity to cross-promote your work. So maybe you chose to work with someone who's a great cartographer, a great artist, and they have never touched D&D before, but you love their work and you say, hey, let's work together on this D&D project. This gives you an opportunity to reach out to their audiences, their fans, and share your love for D&D and share this great project that you're working on together with their fans. And at the same time, their fans can benefit from learning more about the game because of you, right? Comparatively, this artist can also now reach out to your fans because of this opportunity of this co-creation, and they can promote their work to your fans as well. So hey, maybe they can benefit from this. Maybe your fans would also love their work and say, hey, let's commission this artist for 10 character portraits or something like that, right? And that would be great. So there's this cross promotion opportunity. You get to know each other's audiences better, and you get to share your content, share your work, share your branding with these audiences. And for quite a lot of collaborations, this might open up new avenues. You might get to reach out to new audiences you never thought possible before. So maybe you're not very much exposed to the arts community. Maybe you're not very much exposed to the people who are fans of this artist. And suddenly, here you go. These fans of this artist could also become your fans because they realize that, hey, they like your work. They love reading your stories. And then, maybe your audience, your original audience, grows from, say, maybe 200 followers to end up to 400 because you have reached out to a new subset of audiences. And of course, with every successful collaboration project, every successful co-creation project, every co-branding project, you might open up doors to more opportunities, because being willing to collaborate with others means that people are also going to be willing to collaborate with you. And if you are easy to work with, if you are someone who is fun and engaging to work with, then definitely you're going to have a good reputation. You're going to be building that reputation, and that reputation factors into your personal branding as well. One thing you can think about is that often in co-branding, in cross promotion activities such as these, there is usually kind of an unequal power distribution in the sense that maybe your audiences are not as big as those of your collaborator and vice versa. And that's perfectly okay. So this is where the negotiation kind of comes in, and the amount of work that you put in. You have to discuss all these things up front. This is project management. This is managing expectations. And I'm not going to talk about all these things because these are things that are not directly related to your personal branding. But there is one thing I want to talk about. And that is, whatever the case is, you're going to want to be upfront if you are collaborating with someone else. And you want to make sure that you are able to kind of click when it comes to your working styles, when it comes to how easy or difficult you are to work with, and setting expectations. Yeah, because sometimes collaboration just doesn't work out. You might just not have a good enough time working together that you would say, hey, I'm not ever gonna work with this guy ever again. And that might hurt your personal branding because word gets around that you're difficult to work with. So think a little bit about that as well. And in my case, for myself, I prefer to do everything in-house when it comes to my own projects, major projects, but I offer mentorship opportunities to new creators. And I offer a lot of pro bono consulting and editorial services to creators if they are from Singapore or if they are from Southeast Asia, because I want to see more creators getting their work out there from Southeast Asia, from Singapore, who are kind of underrepresented in the great scheme of things, right? In the greater D&D communities. We don't see a whole lot of Southeast Asian creators putting their work out there on DM's Guild. And that's something I want to change. So sometimes when it comes to collaborating with people, if you have met with potential collaborators who have a certain agenda of their own or have a certain goal that they want to fulfill when it comes to creation, that see how you can match with that, how you can manage each other's expectations and make it happen. And that can usually lead to more fruitful working relationships. And that's really helpful in working in the co-creation space rather than just doing everything on your own. Yeah, so think a little bit about that as well. So this is what I kind of cover about co-creation. And so, yeah, so last night we had a bit of a Q&A as well, and we talked a little bit more about why I run workshops such as this. Like, why am I talking about personal branding, which is very, very far away from D&D? Why am I talking about how designers, creators, writers need to kind of market themselves better? Because I think that this is essential. This is absolutely important in helping you to make yourself more visible. And I want to share these tricks and techniques with you and do it in a manner where it doesn't cost you anything. Because a lot of things I'm covering here about personal branding are things that career coaches, image coaches, image consultants, they're going to tell you at a cost. They're going to charge you a lump sum for, say, consulting for these things. And I don't believe in that. I think that these are very basic tips that are kind of common sense as well. You would kind of know these things if you put in a bit of thought about it. But nonetheless, this is a good refresher for everybody, right? So I'm cool with that. And if you want something a little bit more individualized, you want some specialized consultation about what you can do with your work, with how to market yourselves better, look us up. Look us up. Our socials are available. Come check out Neo Tokyo Project. It's down below. See our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everything's right there. Yeah, so come look us up and we'll be happy to chat about it. Join us on our Discord while you're at it. All right, so more or less managed to shave off about a good half hour in this discussion about personal branding. I hope that this was kind of useful for everyone. and I hope that the audio isn't scuffed because that's really what happened with our VODs. We're still trying to work that out. So, Streamlabs problem, I suppose. Anyway, yeah, so I hope that this was a generally useful discussion and that this will help more creators be better at selling themselves and their work in the months, if not years to come. Thank you everyone for tuning in, for checking this out. This is Crimson from Neo Tokyo Project. Sign off.